Hello, this video is intended to help anyone in my higher class who has had to miss a few lessons here and there on Letter to Daniel. I'm going to try and upload videos like this just to talk you through the materials that are on Google Classroom and just to give you a sense of what you're supposed to do with them to help you catch up. Before we go any further, I'd like to draw your attention to a video which I've uploaded and added to the Google Classroom already, which is covering all the various annotations and possibilities for analysis on Letter to Daniel. That YouTube video is on the Google Classroom, and I'd go back and have a look at it. This will help you make sure that you've got a completely annotated copy of Letter to Daniel and that you know what the possibilities are when it comes to analysing different techniques. So go back and look that out. Also, you might find it helps to access my own digital annotated copy of Letter to Daniel, which I've also just this week added to Google Classroom. Now, I should also just say that I'm just going to run through these slides quickly. I can't teach an entire video lesson here, but these are the slides which are on Google Classroom, so please refer to these. The purpose of this video is really just to give you a sense of what you might have missed in class and what you could do at home in order to help you catch up. Now, as a class, once we'd finished analysing and annotating our copies of Letter to Daniel, we started to ask the question, what does this mean in the exam? Now, in the exam, much like at National 5, you'll have to find the relevant section, and it'll look like this. You'll see this big heading here that says prose non-fiction, and then you'll look at 3 possible questions, of which you will answer only 1. Now, one of the reasons I love teaching Letter to Daniel at higher level is that it works with so many different question types. As a class, we looked through these slides and we looked through the last 5 years worth of questions, and I encourage you to do the same. And I encourage you to look through them and ask yourself, how many of these could work with Letter to Daniel? Because in truth, when we went through these in class, 5 years worth of questions from 2015 all the way through to 2019, we found that out of all the questions that were asked, only 1 did not work with Letter to Daniel, and that was one from a year where you were asked about a funny text, and of course Letter to Daniel is not a funny text. But all the other questions from all the previous years would work really well with Letter to Daniel. Now, from here we decided to focus on writing introductions for critical essays, and this was just a recap for the most part with the class because you've all written critical essays before, just at different levels. So we started by asking what technique or what structure do we use for writing introductions, and most of us remembered that we use the structure Tarts. Now, I'm going to briefly run through this structure again just to ensure that you remember it, and I'm going to leave it to you to go on these slides and look at the model introduction that I've got. Then I'm going to ask you to try and write your own. It's going to be very similar to mine, and it's going to be based on the same question as mine, but the key here is to be able to do it efficiently and in a very short amount of time, because on the day of the exam, the introduction is something that you're going to write relatively. So talking about tarts might make you feel hungry, but it's of course an acronym, and the first letter is T for title. Now, before we go into any more of an example, we're going to use this question from 2019 as our example for the model introduction. And this is a really good question for Letter to Daniel because it's asking about provoking a strong reaction. And if that's not clear on your screen, remember you've got access to these slides on Google Classroom. So, starting off with the title. You'd be surprised how easy it is to forget to write the title of the text when you're under time conditions and you're feeling the anxiety and the pressure of the exam. So I've got here, straight away, kicking off with the title, Letter to Daniel. That then takes us to A for author. And again, it might seem like an obvious thing to include the name of the author, but you would be surprised to learn how easy it is to forget to put that information in under time conditions when you're under pressure. So here we go. Letter to Daniel is a non-fiction text written by Fergal Keane. That then takes us on to the R. And I like to suggest that R is, much like you would be familiar with, a reference to the question. Reference to the question is the most specific part of your introduction. That's when you're tailoring it to what's in front of you. So for this question here, it's about provoking a strong reaction. Remember, that's our model question. So I've got that here. Fergal Keane, it's a text which provokes a strong reaction in the reader, whether this be shock, anger, sadness, or hope. So straight away, I've referred directly to the question in my model introduction. Then we get to the second T, which I give 2 associations, I give 2 meanings to, and that's technique and themes. I like you to mention the themes even if the question doesn't ask about themes, because themes is in and of itself a technique. Look how I've done it here. Keane uses a variety of effective techniques such as evidence, imagery, word choice and sentence structure to provoke these reactions whilst developing themes of children suffering, the horrors of war and hope. So I've set my marker up ready for what to expect. My marker can now expect for me to focus on the reactions of anger, sadness and hope. My marker knows I'm going to talk about techniques such as evidence, imagery, word choice and sentence structure. And my marker also knows that I understand that these are used to develop a theme. And the themes I've talked about here are the idea of children suffering, the horrors of war, and hope. Moving on to the S. I again give that 2 words that begin with S. And that is both signposting and summary. So you do need to summarise what happens in the letter, but remember, this just needs to be a brief summary. Don't spend ages of precious time in the exam writing and rewriting the story of the letter. It'll get you no marks, and all you need is for it to work in a sentence. Then you need to signpost. In other words, you're giving the aim of the essay. In this essay, I will ... So what have I got here? I've said, Keane's letter sees the author using the birth of his newborn son as a platform to reflect the different ways in which children are made to suffer in the world. Full stop, that's my summary. Then I move into the signposting. The essay aims to explain how Keane uses techniques to develop central themes and, in turn, provoke strong reactions in the reader. Notice I've also referred directly back to the question there. So that's what an ideal introduction which follows the Tarts structure of title, author, reference to the question, techniques and themes, summary and signpost should look like. And you've got that big model example there on the slides for you to look at. But the other thing I want to stress about Tarts is that those are ingredients, but it's not a set order. You don't need to do it exactly in that order. You don't need to necessarily go from title to author to reference to the question. You can totally shake up the order as long as those ingredients are there. And for evidence of this, look to this introduction here. It's the next slide over, and I'd like you to look at it in your own spare time. But it's a very good introduction, which again ticks all the boxes, has all the right ingredients, but it just does it in its own order. The next thing the class were asked to do was to try and draft their own introduction under time conditions. Now I gave the class 5 minutes to do this. In reality, on day of the exam, you'll spend much less than 5 minutes writing your introduction. But this was just to get us started, to get reacquainted with the Tarts structure and to put this into practice. So that's what I'd like you to do. And you've all been assigned this as a task on Google Classroom. So if you want, at home, you could type out or write out your own introduction, take a picture of it, or send a digital copy to me via the Google Classroom assignment, or you could email it to me. So I hope that's helped just for a brief introductory idea to writing introductions at critical essay level. I'm next going to upload a video onto the Google Classroom which explains the main paragraphs lesson which we've been focusing on more recently in the classroom. And again, there'll be a few tasks for you to take part in there just to help you get caught up. If you have any questions at all, even from home, just get in touch, drop me an email or put a comment on Google Classroom. Hope to see you all back in class soon.